This is Jack Fox, who graduated from Rice University in 2016. He is now with the Detroit Lions and previously had a run with the Kansas City Chiefs and a brief stop in the XFL. Jack, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.
Jack, we're going to get into it. What would you tell yourself as a high schooler?
Like as a high school kicker, punter?
Yes. What advice would you give Jack 5-6 years ago?
It's a good question. I would just tell myself to try to find a good coach in St. Louis, where I went to high school, and really try to work with the same person throughout high school. There's a lot of good coaches. There's a lot of guys that you might not agree with, but at the end of the day, if you get that consistent coaching, I think that helps a lot as a young kicker, punter.
There are a lot of young kickers and punters that are listening. How did you decide to work with a coach? What were you looking for in him?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually didn't work with a coach very often at all in high school and even at the beginning of college. And I always had I had some success and I had a big leg, but I just wasn't very consistent. And I found once I started working with a coach consistently, then my fundamentals, my technique, and my consistency all got a lot better.
Brings up a good point. Fill in the blank. When you are punting your best, or when you are punting consistently, I'm
not thinking about punting. I think that's the biggest thing. When I'm punting the best, it's just happening. I'm not thinking too much about it.
So it sounds like you don't remember the best punt you ever hit then.
Oh, I remember it. I just remember not thinking about anything technical beforehand. And I think that's just being confident. Like when I'm the most confident, I'm not thinking about punting. I'm just trying to punt. So at the end of the day, if I'm confident, I think I'm punting pretty well.
Okay, how do you earn confidence? What's the difference between being confident and technically thinking?
Yeah, and that's just being prepared for me. And that's what I like, getting back to having consistent coaching. Like I'm confident when I have consistent coaching and consistent feedback and I know what I'm doing. So when I have that, then I can just go out there without thinking and do my thing.
So there's a lot to punting. It's a different than field goal kicking, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And the main feature is the drop.
Mm-hmm.
You are punting a ball that is moving versus in kicking or kickoff where the ball is stationary.
Yep.
What is your key to success from a technical perspective?
So I think a big part that people forget is catching the snap is not easy either. Snaps can be everywhere. Snaps can be fast. So catching the snap the same way and having it in your hand before you drop it is probably the most important thing, because you're not going to have a consistent drop if you're holding the ball differently every time you catch it. So I think the most overlooked thing, and the thing that I've really worked on a lot in the last year or two, has just been catching the ball consistently and getting it set before I even drop it.
So what I like to tell guys, and I learned this from Jordan Spieth, who I played golf with at Jesuit in Dallas. We're literally playing putt-putt. And I've shared this before, but I want to share it again because the chances of people listening to my earlier YouTubes that are, scroll down there are very small since I just started this little podcast. So I'll bring it up again. Jordan is at putt-putt in 2010. He's a junior in high school. And the golf team was, like I said, finishing up practice by putt-putt. And he goes, this putt is to win the Masters. And we're all like, dude, this has got a clown in a windmill that you have to putt through. Like, are you kidding me? He goes, no. With that example of an elite golfer, how do you practice like you play? Like, what are things that you do to get you in that mindset?
Yeah, that's a great story. And I've heard that from you multiple times. I think the biggest thing is competing when you practice. Like, go out there with people that are around the same level as you and just have a competition, warm up, and then see who can hit the most balls outside the numbers 45 yards. And I think that's something that's helped me a lot is really competing against other people that are either as good as me or better than me. And I think that helps you perform in games.
Okay, this is a weird question because it is hard if you're out there by yourself, but there's a lot of guys that are listening that are out there by themselves punting. You have a ball, right? What do I do to really emulate, or is there a drill that you do that helps you, set the ball in your hands at least? Or do you just recommend having a guy just go out there and just punt the ball already set?
If you can find somebody, your brother, your dad, shoot, your mom, just have them toss you the ball, because even like a light toss is better than just kicking it out of your hand, in my opinion. Obviously, there's some times where you got to go by yourself, and just spin it to yourself is not a bad thing. But, I would just always suggest getting somebody to throw you the ball. You can find somebody.
Okay, that's interesting. So you would say that you would rather have your grandmother underhand the ball to you versus already having it set and going out there and punting.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So you brought up
the ball's never going to be set in your hands when you punt in the game. You're always catching it before you punt it.
So there's a lot of videos out there where there's guys that are hitting these big punts, right? 5-second punts, posting on Twitter, tagging college coaches. They're kicking it from a preset ball, and they're also kicking it down the middle. Two things that we just talked about. One, when you're competing, how can you get the ball outside the numbers? And then the second part was if you can do it, live. Yeah.
I think kicking out of your hand, you can work on things like leg swing and your drop. It's just not as comparable to a game. And getting outside the numbers is all about having a straight leg swing that you can repeat. So if I just aim the nose of the ball to wherever I'm going and have a straight swing, that's my best chance to put the ball where I want it to. I think a lot of times younger guys swing across the ball. They just have these kind of wacky swings that change at every swing to swing. And it's really hard to consistently put it in the same spot if you're not swinging the same every time.
Right. So you're out there competing with another guy, a couple guys, that gets you in the mindset. But what you're saying is, even while you're out there, it's really important to practice that game-like scenario, because you can be a great punter on the driving range, but then when you go into practice or with a game with a live snapper, you can be completely different.
Yeah, and you don't have to compete every time you go out there. You don't have to have a competition for the whole session. Maybe get out there, hit 20 balls, working on a certain technique or a certain thing you're working on, and then compete afterwards, or mark some punts down and write them down so you know what you're doing for the next session. So you don't have to compete every time, but really make sure you're competing if you want to get better at playing the game.
Bringing this conversation full circle to you earning confidence, that feedback, charting your punts. Excuse me, I use kicks, but I'm talking about punts.
Yeah.
Just charting give you feedback. How do you view looking back at a session by looking at the charting?
I think if you don't have anybody to compete with, charting's probably the second best option. That way you're really competing against yourself. It's kind of like playing golf and keeping score. Like, when you're getting better if you keep score. If you never keep score, it's hard to tell like how much better you're getting, how quickly you're getting better. So charting kicks is all like keeping score in golf to me.
Who is your favorite golfer or your favorite punter? Somebody that you look up to?
Yeah, Johnny Hecker has always been my favorite. Really since I got into punting. I'm from St. Louis, and he was on the Rams when I was probably a sophomore in high school, and that's really when I started punting and taking it seriously. And I played quarterback in high school. He played quarterback in high school. They run a bunch of fakes. I just love the way he punts and the way they play. So I've always been a big fan of his.
Is he your favorite technical punter as well? Like, do you like his technique?
Yeah, I like his technique a lot. Yeah. I don't know, dude. Everybody's so good, and in the NFL, everybody's a little bit different, but they're really fun to watch. Like Thomas Morstead's really fun to watch. He's so short with his steps. He's so quick, and he's probably my favorite technical guy.
Jack, one question I forgot to ask: when you're practicing, how often are you practicing your sky punts or punts that you're trying to down inside the 20-yard line versus the other punts from the field?
Yeah, that's a good question. I work on those every time I punt, I would say. Like, some days I work on them more than others, but even days where I'm hitting mostly spirals, I like to warm up hitting a couple end over end punts inside the 20. I think it's like a good warm up. You don't have to worry about the drop quite as much. You can just focus on leg swing to warm up. So I would say I work on them every time I punt.
Thomas Morstead, Johnny Hecker, what do they have in common, and what are you lacking that they already have?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the main thing is experience, and that ties into confidence too. Like when you've played that many games and you've been that successful, like you're not worried about hitting a bad punt ever. Like you're going for the good punt, and I'm not trying to do that as much as I can. But at the end of the day, when you haven't played in the game yet in the NFL, like getting that first game, I'm going to be pretty nervous. So I think experience is probably just the biggest thing they have that I'm striving to get.
How have you dealt with nervousness in the past? I mean, you've played in packed stadiums when you were at Rice University. You were nervous. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But is there an experience where that comes to mind where you felt nerves, and how'd you deal with it?
Oh, yeah, dude. I get nervous on every game pretty much. I think that's something that a lot of young guys don't understand is that, like, college players, NFL players, like, we all still get nervous. So I think that at the end of the day, you just have to tell yourself that you belong on that field and really strive to hit a good punt rather than worry about hitting a bad punt.
In 20 years, when you're a 20-year vet for the Detroit Lions, what are you going to tell yourself now? Or what would you hope that you tell yourself now?
It's a good question, man. I guess we'll have to wait and do this interview again 20 years down the road.
Jack, you're going into what seems to be a competition up there in Detroit. You've done it in the past with Colquitt at Kansas City, who is, first class, highly regarded for a bunch of the punters and around the league and around our community. You're going to go out there, and what do you need to focus on in order to be punting your best? I know we talked about earlier turning your brain off. If that's the answer, okay, but is there something else that you're not telling us that maybe could be potentially helpful?
I think a lot of young guys and kind of me last year was my mindset was I'm going to hit a huge ball. I'm going to try to hit a 5-0 every time. And I think we forget that the most consistent guys usually win the competition. And the more you try to hit a 5-0, the better chance you have at hitting a 3-5. So it's so much better to be able to hit a 4-5 to 4-7 consistently than a 3-5 to 5-5. So I think that's something I learned in my first year competing against Dustin is he's so good at hitting a 4-5 to the numbers every time. His mishit's not very bad. He's not hitting a ton of 5-2s, but he's not hitting very many 4-0s either. So I think going into this preseason, I'm just really going to focus on limiting my mishits, and if that means not hitting quite as many 5-0s, so be it. But I'm just going to really focus on a 4-7.
There's a book called The Making of Superman, where it focuses on letting go of results, letting go of expectations. And in this case, letting go of the 5-second punt that is the big shiny object that most punters hunger after. And if you're able to let go of that, if any punter is able to let go of that, then the result sounds like you become more of the Colquitt type, where you are consistent, who is limiting your punts. Yeah. Do you want to be remembered as somebody who can hit that big shiny object 6 times out of 10, or would you rather be a guy that hits that 4.48 punt outside the numbers 9 times out of 10?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I just want to be remembered as somebody that played in the league for as long as I can. And I think if you hit too many 3-5, 4-0s, 4-2s, you're not going to be in the league very long. So I'm just trying to do whatever I can to stay in there. And I think that's a great point. Letting that go, letting that 5-2 go is really important. Because I'm still going to hit them. Like, listen, like you're still going to hit them without really swinging for them. It's kind of like being a home run hitter. Like if you want to hit 50 home runs in a year in the major leagues, you're probably going to strike out 200 times. But maybe you're going to hit 25 home runs, not necessarily swinging for it, and hit 300. So I'm trying to be that 25 home run, 300 hitter, if you want to put it in those terms.
Would you rather be Lance Berkman, right, on the Cardinals in 2010, or do you want to be Josh Hamilton on the Rangers in 2010?
Yeah, well, the Cardinals won the World Series in 2011, so I'll be Lance Berkman.
I'm still upset about that to this day, but that's a funny point that we bring up. Lance was a classmate of mine at Rice, and he was a teammate of my dad's, or my uncle's, excuse me, at Rice. And I actually asked Lance just in passing after class, what were you thinking about in that? Was it the 2011 World Series?
Yeah, 2011. He had a game tying hit in the 10th inning of Game 6.
And he had 2 strikes on him.
Yep.
And there was 2 outs.
Yep.
Lance told me he didn't think about, like Jack just said, swinging for the fences and hitting a home run. What he focused on, and he is regarded as one of the best hitters that have ever played the game, right? I mean, he likely will have at least a ballot in the Hall of Fame. He said his only objective was to keep the barrel of the bat in the strike zone for as long as possible. Similarly, for punters, don't focus, like Jack is saying, on the 5-0 punt. Alternatively, focus on keeping your foot flat and having that solid drop to give yourself that optimal timing to hit that ball in what would be the strike zone, where the sweet spot of the ball is meeting the sweet spot of the foot. Well, Jack, this is all the time we have today. Congrats on your career so far. And in 20 years, when you're a 20-year vet, we're looking forward to having this conversation when both of us don't have as much hair on our head as we do today.
Yeah, man. I can't wait.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James.
Bye-bye.